The military of Ecuador is under civilian control. The commander-in-chief is the President of Ecuador, currently Rafael Correa. The military of Ecuador has been involved in border disputes with Peru, and has provided military observers and troops to the United Nations since 1948. Mission: are part of the public forces and have the stated mission of the preservation of the integrity and national sovereignty of the national territory. It also involves participation in the social and economic development of the country and the provision of assistance in the maintenance of internal order. Tasks include fighting organized crime, anti-narcotic operations and illegal immigration. One social development program applies the provision of teachers for rural schools through an accord with the Ministry of Education. Environmental protection is also a priority. Several programs were implemented: national forestation and ornamentation, lonely tree, green surveillance, fire plan, Ecuador forest, and Arenas military reserve. The Ecuadorian territory is divided into 5 joint task force zones, or fuerzas de tarea conjunta, 4 on mainland Ecuador, the 5th being the naval zone. Overseas territories include also the Pedro Vicente Maldonado Naval Biological Research Station in the Antarctic. Geopolitical situation: Ecuador shares a 1,420 km border with Peru. Although marked by many conflicts, relations have improved since the signing of a renewed peace treaty in 1998. However, along the 590 km long border with its neighbor Colombia, relations have been strained mainly due to a cross-border raid by Colombian forces on FARC guerrillas. The armed forces had logistical shortcomings and were caught off guard. The radar did not work, aviation was virtually non-existent and communications were not fully operational. A diplomatic crisis followed in 2008, which some attribute partially to the need for better equipment as well as a new national defense doctrine. The new administration at the Defense Ministry launched a deep restructuring program under the name of Patria I. It involves the modernization of military equipment, improvement of planning and operations within the Ecuadorian territory. Patria I shall be completed by 2011. In 2009, the spending budget was increased by 25% and totaled $920 million. History: Ecuador's military history dates far back to its first attempt to secure freedom from Spain in 1811. In 1822, Ecuadorian troops, alongside other rebel forces, scored a decisive victory over the Spanish Royalist army at the Battle of Pichincha. Although assisted by Peruvian troops, it would fight these only a few years later in 1828 as a member of the Confederation of Gran Colombia. Confederation forces, fewer than half of which were Ecuadorians, defeated a much larger Peruvian force near Cuenca at the Battle of Tarqui. Eventually, civil war would plunge the country and the army into disorder. In 1941, the Ecuadorian military found itself weak and disorganized. The by now long-lasting territorial dispute with Peru escalated into a major conflict, the Ecuadorian-Peruvian War of 1941. A much larger and better equipped Peruvian force quickly overwhelmed the Ecuadorian forces, driving them back and invading the Ecuadorian territory. Ecuador had no choice but to accept Peru's territorial claims and signed peace treaty in 1942. However, the Treaty of 1942 failed to settle the border dispute and occasional clashes occurred in a then still non-demarcated border area between the nations. These clashes flared into another outbreak of serious fighting in January 1981 called the Paquisha War. Similar incidents occurred in 1983 and again in 1984. The last military conflict with Peru occurred in 1995, during the Cenipa War, in which both sides claimed to be fighting inside their own territory until the signing of a ceasefire and the eventual separation of forces. The longest-running source of armed international conflict in the Western Hemisphere had ended. Local engagements: Ecuadorian War of Independence in 1820. Battle of Pichincha in 1822. Gran Colombia-Peru War in 1829. Ecuadorian-Peruvian War of 1858. Battle of Guayaquil in 1860. Ecuadorian-Colombian War in 1863. Chincha Islands War in 1864. Ecuadorian-Peruvian War in 1941. Paquisha War in 1981. Cenipa War in 1995. UN peacekeeping operations. The Ecuadorian Armed Forces has provided military observers and troops to the United Nations since 1948. In November 2003, an Ecuadorian United Nations training center was established under the name of .The. In 2009, Ecuador was deploying over 90 peacekeepers around the globe. 1948 UNIMOGIP United Nations Military Observer Group in Pakistan. 1948 UNIMOGIP United Nations Military Observer Group in India. 1958 UNOGIL Peacekeeping Mission in Lebanon. 1961 ONUC Peacekeeping Force in Congo. 1965 DOMREP Mission of the Representative of the Secretary-General in the Dominican Republic. 1990 ONUC a United Nations Observer Group in Central America, Nicaragua. 1991 ONUSAL United Nations Observer Group in El Salvador. 1994 MANUGU a United Nations Verification Mission in Guatemala. 2003 UNMIL United Nations Observer Group in Liberia. 2004 UNOCI Peacekeeping Mission in Ivory Coast. 2004 MANUSDAH United Nations Stabilization Mission in Haiti. 2005 UNMAS United Nations Mission in Sudan. 2007 UNMIN United Nations Mission in Nepal. 2008 MANURCAT United Nations Mission in Chad. 2008 MANURCAT part of a peacebuilding commission in the Central African Republic. Command structure. The Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces is the President of the Republic. He exercises the political leadership of security and national defense and counts on the advice of the National Security Council. The National Security Council, or NSC, is the superior body responsible for the national defense, in charge of issuing the strategic concept of national security, which in turn constitutes the essential instrument to start the planning and decision-making process. It is chaired by the President of the Republic, which is also the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. It includes the Presidents of the National Congress and the Supreme Court of Justice, the ministers in charge of national defense, government and police, foreign affairs, and economy and finance, the Chief of the Joint Command, and the chiefs of the three branches of the armed forces. It monitors the fulfillment of the defense policies and the strategic plans elaborated by the Joint Command of the Armed Forces, submitted by the Ministry of National Defense. The NSC constitutes the highest-ranking monitoring and crisis management body. The Ministry of Defense is the administrative body of the national defense. The coordinating Minister of Internal and External Security accords the policies and actions that will be adopted by the following institutions as regards internal and external security: the Ministry of Government and Police, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Defense, and the Secretariat General for the Public Administration. The Joint Armed Forces Command is the highest planning, preparation and strategic body of military operations. It advises on national defense and is conformed by the Chief of the Joint Command of the Armed Forces and the commanders of all three branches of the Ecuadorian Armed Forces, the Army, Navy and the Air Force. Branches. Army. The Ecuadorian Army is the land component of the armed forces. Its 24,135 soldiers are deployed in relation to its military doctrine. The contemporary Ecuadorian Army has a large component of jungle and special forces infantry units implemented within its structure. It operates around 130 tanks, 200 IFVs and 60 aircraft. The standard rifle is the Heckler & Amp Koch HK-33. Recently acquired material include 30 4x4 vehicles, 15 trucks, 2 4x4 vehicles, 2 Mi-17 helicopters, 107 Humvee. Air Force. The present-day Ecuadorian Air Force saw combat action several times in 1981 and 1995 when it gained valuable experiences against the Peruvian Air Force. Today the FIA has a personnel of 6,055 and focuses mainly on border control but faces also the war on drugs, guerrilla insurgency as well as humanitarian missions. Since 2009 the FIA is going through some major changes and modernization plans are still ongoing whilst new projects are considered to bolster the country's defense capacities. Recent and ongoing orders: 18 Super Tucano light combat aircraft, 6 Mirage 50, 12 Cheetah supersonic fighter aircraft, 8 Haylli HRUV helicopters from India, 3 D-Lanza radar low-altitude radars, 3 EADS CASA C-295 tactical military transport aircraft. Navy. The present-day Ecuadorian Navy is a compact, efficient and well-balanced force. However, limited funds hinder any major acquisitions and the chances of maintaining a strong force within the Pacific Ocean. Since 2009, the Navy's structure became simplified. The Ecuadorian Naval Zone became one and measures 2,237 kilometers of the Pacific coast and 6,720 square kilometers of the Pacific Ocean. Most seagoing assets are based at Guayaquil. The Navy focuses mainly on the border control and illegal immigration. The Navy operates around 20 major vessels and 25 aircraft. It has a personnel of 7,258. To increase its operational capabilities it acquired recently 2 Heron 1 unmanned aerial vehicles, 4 Searcher Mk2 unmanned aerial vehicles,